This show is brought to you by Imperial Yeast. You hear us gushing over Imperial Yeast all the time, and that's because their yeast performs for us in every batch we brew. Imperial Yeast is adored by commercial breweries and home brewers alike. Their pitch-right pouches are jam-packed with 200 billion fresh yeast cells, guaranteed to deliver flawless, fast fermentations every time. Imperial Yeast strains are grown by a team of pro brewers and homebrewers in Portland, Oregon, who live to help brewers learn more and ferment better. Join our recipe receiving Patreon groups and get a free upgrade to premium Imperial Yeast with every recipe kit that ships out to you. Learn more at patreon.com/homebrew happy hour and come brew with us.
Entertaining shows with content that spreads information and sparks discourse throughout the community. This is the Pearl Media Network.
Hello and welcome to the Homebrew Happy Hour. This is the show where we supply the answers to your homebrewing questions and discuss all things related to craft beer. If you have a question you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, go to homebrewhappyhour.com and click on the submit a question link at the top of the page, or now you can call or text them in by using 325-305-6107. I am your host, Joshua Stubing. Today, I am joined by the Director of Operations at cmbecker.com, Mr. James Carlson down there, as well as the President and Chief Keg Washer, El Jefe himself, Mr. Todd Burns. This is take 2. Is the music okay now, fellas?
Yeah. Sounds good.
I'm gonna cut the music right now because I don't need the music because it gave us problems the first take. I started the show off and I'm like, oh, welcome to the Homebrew Happy Hour, and y'all, James is
it's
down
still
there.
Going, you know that, right?
On y'all's end. See, it's only going on your end because the board is sending two signals. I've got a control signal going and I've got a main out, and y'all are, for whatever reason, you're getting the main out. But now you shouldn't be getting the music at all, correct?
Yeah,
well,
we
lost you for a few seconds too.
This is wonderful. We'll figure out the equipment. The good thing is it's being recorded on my end, so it all will appear to be normal until I get this. I installed this board this morning thinking, what a good time to test it out on our weekly podcast that's important and needs to not have any mess ups. I don't think things through, but I don't have to tell you that, Mr. Burns. You're already very
no comment.
You're already very familiar with that. Yeah, I'll get it figured out. When you spend, it turns out the more money you spend on nicer equipment, the more you have to figure out about the nice equipment. It's not as straightforward. You would think the more money you spend, the more straightforward things become, but that's not the case with production and audio equipment. But anyway, we are very happy to have y'all for this week's episode. It is a very exciting time. We're recording this a day early because I'm going to be at headquarters all day Thursday and all day Friday. We're going to be setting up the barn, staging it for our presentation next week on draft beer systems and building a teaser. Are you guys as excited? I know Todd is. James, I have to ask you, are you as excited about practicing our talk over and over and over again with Todd as I am?
Yeah.
Me too. I'm glad y'all are excited.
Todd is so he told me, James, he was like, oh, this is y'all are gonna love it, because I think his idea is starting Monday. I think Monday, right, Todd? We're gonna start practicing it, rehearsing it. You gave us the lines probably now, or I say lines. You gave us the outline, and it didn't really veer from that. And so we have a good idea of how it's going, but then you want to just, it's going to be like we've memorized it like the back of our hand next week. I don't know.
No, it won't be that. A lot of it's just kind of, it's intuitive, you know? I mean, what we're doing is, we know what we're going to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, I actually am excited about the talk. We are the order for HomebrewCon, it starts on Thursday, June 18th at 11 a.m. or is it noon Mountain Time? I think it's noon Mountain Time. And that's the keynote speech. And then there's a couple hours pass by. And guess who is the first presentation of HomebrewCon? It's us. Is
it really?
We are. We're the first formal presentation after the keynote address. Yeah, we're a couple hours after it. No pressure. What I'm trying to do, because, we're going to use a similar setup to what I have up here, not the board that's messing up on us now.
Great.
On a
That's encouraging.
On a piece of equipment that I'm pretty confident is going to work. How about that? We are going to do the presentation with OBS, which is a free software. We're having multiple camera angles. I want us to start off the conference at such a good quality that then it sets the bar. And if other people don't do that, they'll be like, oh man, we should have, that Homebrew Happy Hour, they really put in the effort. And then I'll get all the glory and people will pat me on the back. And well, they'll say we all did a good job, but I'll say like, but what about that production? It was pretty good, right?
And that's I see it. It's on the schedule now.
I can hear it now. The next podcast, if it's not good, he'll be like, I feel bad about having the bar set too high for everybody else.
Yeah, you know me very well. That's exactly. If it doesn't go perfect, we have a test stream with our buddy Joe Damgard there at the AHA. Hi, Joe. We are testing with him on Tuesday at 3 p.m. They use a platform called Crowdcast. I made sure all of our equipment is going to play nice with it. So on paper, we should be good to go. We're going to do the test. I will know after Tuesday. I'll be able to confidently say whether or not it's going to be as good as it is in my head. But most things that I envision in my head, I have to settle somewhere between best expectations and, oh my God, it's a train wreck. So we'll be somewhere in between there. That is my informal segue, though, to saying that, yes, if you are not already signed up for HomebrewCon online, go to homebrewcon.com, click on the link for registering. You do have to be a member of the AHA to attend, and if you are already a member, it's only $99 for full access, and if you're not a member, it's $139. And again, with your membership, we can't list all the perks of the membership, but the easy perks are... the AHA does, legislative representation on our behalf nationwide. That's something that I can't do on my own. I don't know if you guys have ever tried making a legislative difference, but my voice, it's loud, but it's not influential. And they also, a lot of homebrew club support. We've had Matt Bowling on before, and he gave the whole spiel on what they do for clubs. It's incredible the amount of support they provide, the logistical support, informational support, whatnot. And then Zimmergy. I still haven't figured out how most people pronounce it. I think it's Zimmergy magazine, which we love. I have to come up to headquarters and steal my copy because they're all shipped up there to you guys. But reading that magazine is one of my favorite things to do. And it is a quarterly magazine, or not quarterly, bi-monthly is what you call it, right? When it's every other month?
Yeah, bi-monthly.
Bi-monthly. So we also last week announced that we had 5 tickets to give away for HomebrewCon online. We did the drawing. I did it this morning. The winners, I'm ready to announce if you guys are ready. Todd brought it up last time, and I think everyone's on board with this. You do have to be a member, obviously, to use it. So worst case, if one of you who I'm about to announce won and you're not already a member, you're only spending $39, but that gets you the full year of membership plus the access to HomebrewCon online. So we did the drawing. We had... make up guess, both of you, how many entries of individual people, not the 15 bonus entries that every member of our Patreon got. How many people do you think individually signed up for these tickets?
200.
500.
More. We had 874.
Wow.
874.
Individual people, not just the bonus. Okay.
People.
Wow.
That's good. That's great.
Well, and I you know what? Some of them might have been Chinese and Russian bots. I didn't, they had to answer my question at the end was, are you a robot? And maybe the bots are getting more sophisticated, but they also had really nice and or mean things to say about me. So again, maybe the bots are getting really sophisticated these days.
Them damn AI bots.
Did Vladimir win? Or
Yeah, yes, all the winners are Vladimir. Yeah, no, we starting off. You're gonna get emailed to this evening after the podcast is published. Instead of emailing them before, I like the excitement of them having to hear it on the show. Plus, I would just want you to tune into the show. But starting off, Mark Dunce, which is our buddy Mark. When I saw his name, I was like, oh, they're going to think I fixed it for him. Mark Dunce, Henry Elsessor, I think I pronounced that right, William Walls, Justin Schmidt, and Neil Wendell. congratulations, my friends. You all, you're listening to this first, and then tonight, check your inbox. You're going to have an email from me telling you how to redeem it. Our friend Carrie at the AHA, she's going to hook you up with your ticket. Make sure that you're able to sign up. And if the five winners aren't at our presentation, I'm gonna throw a fit. I'm gonna.
Oh no! Congratulations, guys!
Heck yeah! Good
now
job.
You get to see the Three Stooges in action
live, right? Not just in action, but live. Oh, it's gonna be wonderful. So, with that out of the way, real quick before we get to the questions, we do have our June recipes. We did announce y'all have already chosen them. A lot of our members of our Patreon have already their pick in to me. It is going to be the 8-Bit Wit, which is a Belgian wit beer, or the Bohemian Pilsner, which is one of the true to style entries that we've had. It was the one that James always, that's my favorite story of him. I hate this beer. It's terrible. And everyone else loved it.
Yeah.
I've never had that experience. Usually
I've never done that before.
My experience is usually I love this beer and no one else likes it. And I'm like, what? Maybe something's wrong with me. No, they're wrong. But I think that's what I want to brew with my pop for June is the Bohemian Pilsner, just because of how well yours turned out. And it's Pilsner season, right? Isn't it fair to say it's Pilsner season? Todd, do you have any brew days coming up? And if so, do you ever brew our recipes?
Why is it Pilsner season? We're going into summer. Wouldn't Pilsner season be in the winter?
Why would it be? I always associate.
Oh, just because they tended to brew and it was so hot.
No,
brew
you're right.
Pilsner.
You're right.
What I'm drinking Pilsner season is what.
Yes.
Okay. I got you.
And you know that I'm not gonna lager it for any more than I have to. I'm hoping from grain to glass, it's like a 5-week experience. I want this to be.
I kegged my beer last night, and I cannot get it to clarify. I think it's because it's got a little bit of wheat in it. I think that's what's keeping it from getting 100% clarified. But yeah, that was kind of a stupid thing to bring up because that's actually not a Pilsner. Never mind.
Wait, what? Which one are you talking about?
It's beer.
It was an IPA. Yeah. Mosaic IPA, and it's got some wheat in it. I'm curious if anybody else has brewed it, if they had any problems with it, getting it super clear, if the wheat might be the reason it's not getting as clear.
It's interesting and total off track on a homebrew group I'm a part of. Someone used Dieter, the 03 from Imperial, love Imperial, and he was brewing a Kolsch, and his question was, hey, it's been like a month of cold conditioning in the keg, and it's not clear yet. I told him I use Dieter all the time. We use Dieter all the time. And I've never had any clarity issues, but I don't rack from primary to keg and cold condition and serve. I do a secondary every time. And I'm wondering if doing the racking from primary to keg may be the reason why he was lacking clarity. I mean, there's a lot of variables, and maybe I'll tell him hey, give me all the variables and we'll do your question on the show. But anyway, we've been fortunate, my dad and I, with all of our beers having good clarity, except for the ones that aren't supposed to, like the Helleweisen that we did, where my dad's like, oh, I just wish it was a little bit brighter. It's supposed to not be.
You're right.
Yeah,
he's ruining it.
I might have pulled it out a week earlier than I should have. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens now that it's in the kegerator or Keezer. It's in the Keezer, the one we're building during the presentation. Now that it's in there, the temperature is actually colder than it was by about maybe 6 or 7 degrees. So maybe it'll continue to clarify, and in a few days we'll have a clearer beer. We'll see what happens.
Yes, we will. So with all of that up front, and I don't know how long we're into the show, because usually people are like, oh, so if the small talk is good, they're like, oh, the small talk, you have to do more. If the small talk's bad, they're like, just say your intro and get to the content. So here we are. We have 3 questions for y'all today. Question number 1 came from our buddy Darren using the submission form at homebrewhappyhour.com. Darren wrote, my wife and I just brewed our first recipe kit from Keg Connections, and it is fermenting right now. We used an 8-gallon Bayou Classic stock pot, and our only concern is that it was difficult to dip all of the grains into the amount of water that the instructions called for us to use. Would it be okay in the future to add more water at the beginning of the process, or is it best to stick to the instructions? We may end up getting a smaller pot if need be. We love the show, and finding you online is what got us interested in brewing beer at home. Darren. A couple things. He wrote in there, I don't know if y'all have the PDF. He wrote Keg Connections. This is a great time to remind y'all, don't go to keggconnections.com because a competitor of Todd's 12 years ago bought that domain and they use it. And I won't name them. I won't give y'all the satisfaction. But
I see that from time to time. Keg Connections, especially on mail coming in.
all the time. Or I love it when we have to support questions and it gets like 4 or 5 phone calls later where you realize, oh, you ordered from insert other company here. But they thought they were ordering from us, and so they're trying to get support on a product, and it's like, well, wait, we don't even sell that product. And like, I bought it from keggconnections.com. But I looked up Darren's. Darren did buy his recipe kit from us, and it was easy for me to determine that too, because all of our extract recipes on Keg Connection are steeping grain mini mash, and the vast majority of them are yours, Mr. Carlson. So I'm going to throw the question to you first. You wrote the instructions. Would you recommend? Is it a pot issue or a volume issue, or what is your take?
I think the instructions were written for a 2.5 gallon pot, which is what most people have. So easiest answer to this question. I think the problem is your pot's just too big for that batch. And I think a 2.5 gallon, they're very reasonable. That's what I would do. I would just change to a smaller pot.
Todd, if Darren was like me and we're stubborn and I don't want to spend any more money, is there a problem inherently with adding my volume so that I can actually, because when he says dip.
Oh, no, not at all. In fact, one of the reasons we keep the volume small is because we're concerned about them boiling over. So, if you have a larger pot, you're not concerned with boiling over, and you can do the full amount if you want. The only downside is it's more difficult to cool. So if you're using an ice bath, then now you have to have more ice in your sink. And, we just finished a video on that, and we have a portion where we're cooling it down. And then you also have the advantage if you're adding some colder water at the end, that colder water helps lower the temperature along with the ice bath. So, you're losing some of those advantages. But, the flip side of that is if you're using a coil, a wort chiller coil to cool with, then that doesn't really matter. It's not going to take that much longer. That you need that anyway to be able to get the amount of liquid over the coil. So I guess it depends on what your other equipment is and what you want to do. So,
and this is also a good time for me to inject a question for y'all. If, I don't know anything about those Bayou Classic stock pot, except that they've been around forever. I know in my experience, a lot of people use them for turkey frying. Do you know if they're like triclad? And if he were getting a new pot, is there some characteristics of the pot that you would recommend? Hey, if you're going to go ahead and get a different size pot, make sure it has A, B, C, and don't just go on Amazon and buy what's cheap.
Oh, definitely triclad is nice because if you're heating from a heat source on the bottom, it would definitely be nice. Stainless steel versus aluminum, I would prefer stainless steel. The other thing to look at is, again, how wide is it? So I would rather, if I was going to use an 8-gallon pot or a 6-gallon pot or whatever that size was, I would want one that was narrower, not wider, because you'd like to get your volume up a little bit if you're using a chiller and that sort of thing. So those are some things that I would probably. So if you have a really wide pot, you got the same problem. You got all your liquids at the bottom, and it's you can't get the bag in there to dunk it up and down. So it makes it a little more difficult.
And James, I don't even remember if did you ever do extract brewing?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I extract brewed for about 5 years.
Oh, that's right. The wheat beer was your first one, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's right. I remember. Did you?
Yeah. I would just stress the good quality pot, because a lot of times if you go with a single wall stainless steel pot, they can develop pinholes from heat at the bottom, and they can start to develop leaks. If you got a triclad bottom, you won't have to worry about that. It distributes heat evenly at the bottom as well, too.
The smallest size we sell of what I would call a better pot, not aluminum, but stainless, are those 8-gallon ones, right, Todd?
Yeah. The one that we send with kits is just a really standard basic pot that's single wall. Like James said, the one nice thing about the triclad is you're distributing the heat more evenly, so you're going to eliminate little areas that may scorch easier and that sort of thing. But having said that, if all you're doing is an extract brew and you're doing it on a stovetop, you can, I mean, we do it all the time. In fact, the video we just completed, we were just using a single wall standard pot in it because that's what comes in the kit. So you certainly can use it. And, I would say this, don't let an expensive pot stop you from trying to homebrew. In other words, if you're trying to homebrew the first time, you don't have to have a super fancy pot to basically get something to a boil, So don't let the cost and the expense stop you from trying homebrewing. One of the fun things about it is once you get going and you're doing a lot of homebrewing, you tend to then spend more money and get the nicer equipment.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I will say, I'll just add to that having nicer pots has made a difference for us because they last, right? like that's been the big thing for me. One of the best pots I bought was that Spike 10-gallon. And even though, it's not our primary anymore, now we're using an Amsel 15-gallon. But having it for even just, if we want to heat up the strike water or with sparge water rather on the side, I know like that thing's reliable. It heats up quick because of the build quality. So it's very efficient in how it disperses the heat, it seems. And same with temperature dispersion. I know in our nicer pots, when we take our thermometer reading, it's a little more consistent than some of the cheap aluminum ones. It seems like the heat, like the aluminum ones, I can get a 4-degree variance if any given spot, just like right below surface level, if I'm a little bit closer to this side of the kettle, or if I'm a little bit closer to this side, where I think the nicer ones seem to just disperse it better. But that could be total placebo and not an actual scientific thing. I don't claim to be smart, but yes, I think what we're getting at, like what James said, is Darren, it wouldn't be a bad idea to get a smaller pot. Just get a nicer one and make sure you don't boil over. Right?
Exactly.
Perfect. So thank you so much. This is also a great time to remind you all that when we take your question on air for an episode, we send you a $25 gift card to kegconnection.com. So Darren, check your inbox. You have a gift card. Moving on to question number 2 came from our friend Alejandro S., who used the submission form at homebrewhappyhour.com. Alejandro wrote, "Hello to my friends. Your podcast is my favorite that I listen to every week." Thank you, Alejandro. I finally have a question for you. If you talk to other brewers online, they will tell you that closed transferring is the only way to transfer beer. On your Instagram online, which is just me, I've seen Josh open transferring with gravity from bucket to glass, then to keg. And by glass, he means carboy. So from bucket to carboy, then to keg. My process is similar. How expensive would it be to keep the same equipment but do closed transferring? What do I need? More importantly, do you think it's necessary, or is it snobs making noise online? Salud, Ali. That's a great question because I do get, and it's either people just trying to rib me for fun or genuinely curious. Like when we transfer, it is always open, and sometimes, really unpopular opinion with people, we transfer outside sometimes because I know if it's a beautiful day, my dad's like, let's just do it out here. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Like it's not worth it. Yeah. I have not had an issue enough to where wild yeast has come in or leaves or bird droppings or flies or whatever. So knock on wood, we've been lucky so far, perhaps, but I don't think it is a purist thing. I think it is people wanting the best of their beer. Todd, when you made the jump, was it because you had the conical fermenter and you didn't need to do open, or did you always do closed transferring? I've never transferred.
No, I mean, I still do open transfer a lot of times if I'm not using I run out of room. I can't always have a beer in the nice fermenter because I brew more beer than if I have to wait 3 or 4 weeks for it to clarify, even when it doesn't. I still do open for, but I will say this, I do kind of a combination. So I always purge everything before I transfer into it. So I have just a stainless steel piece of tubing that I have, but you can use hose as well. In fact, I do sometimes use hose. You just want to make sure you sterilize whatever you're using. I shove that down in my carboy. I have it on my CO2, my regulator, and I'll sit there and actually put my hand over it and cup it and blow the CO2, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, or let it flow for a while. And I'll try to purge that whole thing with CO2. Then I'll stick the hose in and do the transfer. I have done it without doing that, without having an issue as well. So maybe I'm being a little anal about it. I think that as your beer is filling up, you're pushing. Obviously, there's air touching the top of the beer, but it's for a very, very short period of time. And if it's a secondary, you're still going to get some fermentation that occurs. So you're going to create some CO2 that pushes the rest of that out. If you're kegging, so you're going from your secondary to your keg, very different, because at that point, I'd always purge my keg. In fact, some people brewed in the office the other day and filled a keg up, and I was horrified to see that they weren't purging, but I guess, the beer tastes fine, but I was like, why wouldn't you purge? So what I do is I take the disconnect for the liquid and I put that on the end of my air hose. I usually use an MFL so I could just unscrew the gray one. I put that on, put the lid on, and then I let it go from the bottom up and pull the tab and do it several times to make sure that it's totally full of CO2. And then if I'm doing a closed transfer, then I just transfer from there. If I'm doing an open transfer, I still have to take the lid off, put the hose down in there. But as it's filling up, there's a layer of CO2, a blanket of CO2, and you're pushing that out as you fill your keg. Then when I finish filling the keg, I put the lid back on, shoot some more CO2 from the bottom, pull it up, and make sure that I purge all the oxygen out. And doing it that way, I've never had an issue. I think when people have an issue, it's usually because they don't put the hose down to the very bottom of whichever vessel it is, and then carefully start the transfer and start it filling up. What they end up a lot of times, I think, when people get that bad flavor is when they put the tube on the top and let it splash all the way to the bottom. So they're basically oxygenating that beer as they're filling up the vessel.
Yeah, that nice cardboard taste that we all love to experience in the first pour. I was going to ask you, I'm assuming you're talking about it was Joe and or Zach. They weren't splashing though, right? They just weren't purging.
I did not mention any names. You brought up names.
I told Joe the one time that I knowingly oxidized beer was when my dad was out of town and we had an ESB. This was like 2 years ago or 18 months ago. And he was like, you gotta go transfer the beer because that's what it called for on James's recipe. And my dad is such a stickler to your recipes, dude. Whenever I need to get you to just text him when I need you to be like, hey, it's okay if you let this sit longer, or it's okay, because he's like, no,
Yeah.
James said. But so I go over there and I'm on my phone, surprise, Todd, and I'm looking at my phone and I have the transfer tube, I'm holding it, and I hear the splashing, and it took me 10 seconds to realize, oh no.
Doesn't take much, does it?
Oh, and thankfully that ESB was not my dad's favorite as a style, not just the cardboard taste. So it actually sat in there for about 8 weeks, 7 or 8 weeks, and by week 6, it actually tasted fine. The off flavor finally went away to where I was like, oh, thank God. I was still drinking it because I'm prideful. I was like, Dad, I don't know what you're talking about. It tastes fine to me.
I've done that.
Yeah, it was oxidation of your beer.
I've never had it go away. It went away.
Yeah, I mean, it went away. It mellowed out more. No, I'm lying to tell you if it truly went away. It mellowed out, or I think it mellowed out to where it wasn't as noticeable. Like the first week of it, it was a kick in your face of cardboard, right? And it a slight hinge of metallic taste, which I forget what caused that, if that's oxidation as well. But it was mainly just cardboard. And the biscuit notes were there of the ESB and that earthy from the Fuggles. But the Fuggles almost seemed to get stronger, or that earthiness took over by week 6 or 7 to where I was like, all right, now it just tastes like a bad ESB, not a oxidized ESB, just a bad one. But again, that's the lesson I learned was all your hard work can go down the drain from carelessness and a phone addiction. I mean, there's a lot of factors. So Todd, I know before show you asked to make sure we have it in stock, and it's actually in the link of the show notes. There is, if you're using Glass Carboy, there is a nice little utility or utensil tool, like an orange rubber thing that pops over. Now, besides selling it, are you familiar with it? Is that the solution for people to stay on budget and be able to use their current equipment for closed transfer?
So after the show, I'm going to get one of those. I'm going to take it home, and when we do our transfer for the next part of our video next week, I will rig it up with a stainless steel tube to go down and some way to bring it in, and we'll do a transfer the normal way for the video, and then maybe do it the other way and show people that as well. What do you think?
Oh, I love that idea.
Yeah.
Content is my favorite thing to do, so I love that.
I wanted to say a disclaimer, a very important disclaimer. Glass carboys are not made to hold pressure. So do not cap that thing and crank it up to 15 PSI and do a transfer, because it may or may not explode with glass and beer everywhere, right? So I see people do it all the time, but they're doing it at extremely low pressure, like maybe 2 PSI or 3 PSI. And I don't even claim that is not dangerous. I'm just saying I see a lot of people do that. But, be aware that those vessels are not made to withstand pressure. So be very careful if you do that.
Yeah, we always give disclaimers or liability sake, but yes, that is great to remind people. Glass carboys, if you thought they sucked when you dropped them and they broke all over you, wait till you put some pressure in them. That you're really gonna see how bad it's gonna suck or how bad it can get. But I think
wear your safety glasses in chainmail if you're going to take it to 15 psi.
Chainmail.
It'll never reach 15 psi. Never. Glass don't bend or flex; it just breaks.
Yeah, and if you're not wearing, even with safety glasses, you're gonna get cut up. We're gonna read about you. We're gonna read about you online. If you survive and heal, then we'll make fun of you. If you don't, we just will never talk about it. But we will probably talk about it behind your back. But anyway, I'm going to actually take one home too, Todd, because I love taking questions for the show when people have situations very similar to mine. And I like getting called out too when it's polite and constructive. And he didn't call me out, but it made me realize, maybe it's time to try closed transferring for me and my dad and see what kind of difference it might make. Maybe we enjoy that process more. Having that cap product on there too, we can every batch have a blow-off tube and the airlock very easily installed. And having a blow-off tube for me has only been something that we've done responsively. Like, the need is there because you can see the krausen getting into the airlock. Crap, let's go make a blow-off. But what if every batch of fermentation, we just had a blow-off by default? And if you need it, perfect, it's already there. If not, it's already part of your setup. That's what y'all do, right? With your conicals, it's already part of the setup, isn't it?
Yeah. But I hardly ever use a glass for the primary. So, but I do use a blow off a lot. I've got some lids that are rigged. In fact, we were going to put that on the site. I think they're on the site. The lids that have the what do you call them? The bulkheads, James, with the large.
Yeah, they're bulkhead
nipple coming on. I think we have those on the side. If we don't, we should get them up. But I put a bulkhead instead of the normal little grommet that goes in the hole on some of mine, and then I take like real big siphon hose and have that go into a bucket. And I love it because if I've got a beer that's really going to town, or I've filled it pretty high, I don't have the issues with having to change that airlock out every 15 minutes. So
yeah, or suck back, right? It can get bad if you don't address it. We've had blow offs, and then the beer, I believe, had to have gotten oxidized because of the airlock's off, it's wide open. There was wort beer, I guess, at that point all over the ceiling, and we're like, oh, what do we do? Just stick the airlock back in, and it's not a good sign. But yeah, I'm gonna look into it too. It's in the show notes, and the reason I know it's in the show notes, because sometimes I say that on here and then I forget to do it. I've already made the show notes and it's in there. I linked to it right now. So if you go to
Did you really? Okay.
I made the show notes ahead of time based off the questions. I'm trying to get in better habits, guys, because one show we talked about having a hop chart, and this guy he was a gentleman about it, but he comments on the actual post, which not a whole lot of people comment on our website. And I was like, oh, what is this? And he was like, hey, Josh, you promised a hop chart, and that was like 5 days ago. And you
oh, my friend, I know the feeling.
Preaching to the choir, right?
Welcome to my world.
I'm editing this out. But I'm not, because I'm lazy and I'll forget to. Alejandro, yes, we will make a video, but yeah, give it a try. Go to the show notes, homebrewhappyhour.com. You find episode 186. It'll be there in the link for closed transferring. You'll see the word closed transferring. Click on it. It'll take you to that product on Keg Connection, and I think that will help you out. And I think us making a video showing how to do it will help even more, because a lot of people are visual people, myself included. And so if we can show people like, hey, here's how you traditionally close transfer, which is the second part of our Extract Brew Day video series that we're publishing. But also, here's an option. If you want to spend a little bit more money, not a lot, and you have a glass carboy, very easy to do. So thank you for the...
Maybe we should make one. We'll experiment with it, and we could make the whole setup.
Exactly. I think that would be a great
add that
idea.
later as well.
Yeah, exactly. We're like everything. If you're using glass carboy, get this for closed transferring, and you're good to go. And I agree with you. We only use glass in primary when we don't have a available bucket or that Genesis. I don't know why, besides I've always just thought glass for secondary was better so I could see the clarity. Using glass for primary is okay, right, guys?
Yeah, I did it for years.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Just wanted I wanted to make sure we covered that too, because that has not been my experience with a lot of homebrewers. Glass has usually been for secondary. And then when people just forego secondary altogether, they just get rid of their glass. So, but yes, Alejandro, thank you for the question. One more question for today's show came from Ivan, our buddy who used the submission form at homebrewhappyhour.com. Ivan wrote in, hey, Josh and friends, longtime fan of the show, and I love that James made you bring the show back. Best decision ever. He put periods after each one. And I think he tried to use the clap emoji, but it doesn't come over in email. Oh. So best decision ever. I have a question about adding a carbonation stone to my kegs dip tube. Is there a downside to doing this? Unless my thinking is wrong, it seems like I can more easily force carbonate, and my beer should always be properly carbonated, right? Is it possible that the dip tube carb stone will overcarbonate my beer? Ivan, it is. I had to take this again because I connect things. James, it is 3 years to the day that you had us redo the podcast that we published.
Is it really?
It is.
To the day. Wow.
Well, June 9th. Sorry, today's the 10th. So
it's pretty close.
Pretty darn close. And I saw that question, and I was going to say, oh, let me go do my homework and see which episode we actually came back. It was episode 42, and it was, and I knew it was that because it was titled, "Hey, we're back," and it was with you and Todd. And then we did a HomebrewCon 2017 recap. So we had 8 months and 7 days of no content between 2016 and 2017. And Mr. Carlson, when you got hired in 2016, you were like,
best decision Todd ever made, right?
well, hiring you, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I know what you meant.
Best decision I ever made. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah.
No, I'm really shocked that y'all are actually wanting my opinion on carbonation. You know, that's not a good thing.
That was the other reason
I brought it. Todd's.
I didn't think about that.
This is Todd's question all day long. Now, the equipment side, I can say, you know, that can be, unless it's in the lid, it can be kind of hard to clean. Just make sure you back flush it and sanitize it real well. But yeah, that's a great idea. They're kind of expensive to do, but if you can put one in every keg, yes, that's a great idea.
But
I'm going to let Todd, he's the carbonation master. I'll let him answer that.
Todd is the carb master. I will say I have had, I've had Zach put in carb stones for most of my kegs. I say when I had kegs here at the house, I had 3, and my dad has like 9. So 3 of our 12 have carb stones. I will tell you, for me, it's been a psychological thing where I feel more confident in the carbonation levels. Todd is, he rides James so hard about his carbonation.
No, it's because it's true.
About the carbonation issue. So I always am like, well, Dad, like some beers will come in under carb, and I'm like, and then some beers will be over carb. And I'm like, like Todd, you have made a complex in me because of the way you rib James about his carbonation issues. So yes, what is your opinion on carb stones?
You know, I have used one for water, but I've never used one for beer. You have more experience than I do with it. I mean, we've sold them for a long time. Most of the ones that we sell where they're installed in a kegger, I can tell you, are not being used for beer. They're being used for primarily water. You know, the biggest problem with a carb stone for me is I brew a lot of beer and I keg a lot of beer, and the lid ones would probably work fine. And again, I haven't used one. Josh, you've used one. The ones that are he specifically mentioned installed on the dip tube. The ones that are installed on a dip tube, when you get those installed, you can't take them out. You can pull them up and probably get your hand in there or something, but you can't pull them out. So cleaning them, if you have some beers with well, not only cleaning them, but I don't know exactly. Maybe y'all can help me with this. What do you do if you got a beer that's got a bunch of hop trub, or it's got some yeast on the bottom that sometimes you get that little bit of yeast at the bottom that you're sucking out.
Yeah.
I don't know how you handle that.
If it was mine, I would you'd have to do 2 or 3 rinses, and then you have to have gas attached to the stone. So you're wanting to soak it in sanitizer or cleaner, and you're wanting to push it out and flush it a couple of times till.
And we all have a system. I mean, we have a system. We do it the same way every time now. I give James a hard time, but James is good at carbonating now.
He is.
Yes. Because we have a system. We know what we do.
Yeah.
The way I do it is I put it at like 40 PSI. I hook it up to, really, it doesn't matter if it's a gas or the liquid, because if it's the gas side, I'm got it on the side. I'm just doing this down there. I've got it on the side, and I've got it on my lap, and I rock it back and forth, and I do that basically maybe for a couple of minutes. And I used to do it for like 4 minutes or 5 minutes, and I overcarbonated stuff sometimes. So now I do it for a couple of minutes. I try it. I do it another minute. I try to do another 30 seconds. And I always try to come in a little under, versus I would rather be a little under. That's what I did last night. It's a little under. I put it in the kegerator. Within a couple of days, it'll be perfect. So, I mean, for me to try to I have right now, I cleaned them this weekend. So I know I've got 14 or 15 kegs at home. To try to deal with having a carb stone in every one of those, the expense and the trouble of it just wouldn't be worth it.
Yeah. And I'm glad. I want to touch on a point you brought up so that I can clarify. I had 3 kegs. Or 2, pardon me. I only had 2 of my 3 with them on it, because remember, at home, I was mainly doing water. That was one of the reasons why I got rid of my keg, or I was happy to take my kegerator over to my dad's house, was because at the time we needed the space there for beer. And at home, I was only doing water on it. We have now used those kegs, one of them with a beer on it, because I did want myself to kind of experiment, like, hey, how is this going to affect the beer? And it seems we did one with the one that had the carb stone. We've done one beer where we carbonated it with the lid version. And the lid version, the only thing is, and again, it might be mental. I'm open to my experiences being unique and not the standard, but that plastic, the black plastic line that comes from the lid down to the carb stone, I almost feel like I could taste that in the final beer faintly, and it didn't last the whole time. But do you know what I mean? How the way that plastic smelled, I almost had that taste in the beer, to where I was like, "Is this leaching now? What is going on?" But it wasn't like punch you in the face. It was just subtle, like a little plasticky, but it's not there every pour. Maybe okay, and it's not. When you're using the lid type, you only do that for carbonating, and then you go back onto your gas post. So in theory, it shouldn't have leached, or it shouldn't be there. I don't know the plastic type. I don't know. This was a prototype from vendor friends of ours, so I have no idea the process of approval, if it was NSF, any of that good stuff that you'd want to know if it was a consumer product. But the one that had the standard stainless steel dip tube with the carb stone at the end of it, that seemed carbonated fine. We didn't rock that beer during the forced carbonation. We set it and we forget it. I don't know if that is something that is a pro that you would consider. Like, Todd, if you had a carb stone, if I lent you that keg and you saw it had the carb stone, would you still do forced carb like you've done every keg?
No. I mean, I would just put it on there and let it do its thing. I mean, that's kind of the point of it. The part that confuses me, and maybe you can answer this because you've used it before. You know, when you keg a beer, often, let's say we got a keg from Joe that had a carb stone on it. Okay, and it's it's dry hop, so it's got a lot of hops still sitting inside of the keg. Wouldn't those because you're trying to pull that liquid through? What is it? How many microns are the ones?
0.5.
0.5 micron. I mean, wouldn't it just immediately clog up?
We have not used it on a hoppy beer. But
even on a regular beer where you have some yeast, it's never flow issues.
No, we didn't, and we used it on the Kolsch, and only because I was so like when I brought that alt beer up to y'all, and the bottle, the taste ended up being okay, but the bottle issue was like, it's a little undercarbed, and I've heard that a lot about bottling. So my brilliant self, when we did the Kolschweisen, was don't worry about messing up the beer, Josh. Worry about the carbonation level, and the carb stone is on that keg, and no issue with pouring. I'm like,
but super clear beer, right?
Yeah, very clear, absolutely. And that's the only beer we've done it on. And maybe you're right. Maybe that is a great I even look.
I don't know if I'd do it on a hazy IPA,
No, or anything dry hopped in the keg.
Yeah, no, and that's a great thing to bring up is that it might. Well, two things. Like Todd said, if you install the dip tube version like I did on the kegs I was using for water, it is permanent. And if unless you like cleaning or taking the dip tube out and cleaning it or trying to forcefully shoot air through it to clear it out, you're not going to have a good experience with that keg of hazy New England IPA or whatever, because like you said, it doesn't take a lot to clog up. And Todd, so you have told me that you've actually cut, is it an inch or two off the bottom of your liquid dip tube for the sake of having clarity through the pour, right?
On some beer styles I have where I knew that I was going to have some stuff at the bottom, and so I cut the dip tube a little bit.
Wait, on the gas side though, it should be fine, right? Because it's not coming out. You're saying it'll clog up the actual carbonation stone and
those
making it.
Things go. I mean, the ones
more than halfway down.
They're going. I thought that they went on the liquid side because they're going. It's maybe not it's on the gas side, but it's not like the regular very short 1 inch dip tube. It's going way down in there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you're saying even though gas is coming out of the carb stone, that yeast nutrients, or not nutrients, pardon me, like residue or hop residue could still clog it and basically making it not function, thus not carbonating your beer. That's what you were saying.
No, I think I'm an idiot. I was thinking that that because I always force carbonate with the long dip tube, I was assuming that when we put those in, we were putting them on the long dip tube, but we're not. They're still going on the short
gas side.
They're just really, because I've seen them before. They're just really long.
They are. But they go more than halfway down inside the keg.
Correct.
The gas tube is about that long, but we replace it with something that's probably 16, 18 inches long.
Correct.
No, it shouldn't be a problem. I'm an idiot.
Which you started saying that, and I was thinking, and I was going with you because we've forced carbonated from the liquid side before to get it because it's traditionally the long dip tube. So I'm glad I caught that before. I mean, I'm not editing it out because again, that's our shtick, but But I did save you, though, from people telling you an idiot before you acknowledged.
No, I would much rather acknowledge myself being an idiot than having. Well, I don't care. I mean, people call me an idiot all the time. I'm used to it.
Now might be a good time to. You told me you were an idiot last week about the beer gun. Do you remember why you were an idiot? Because I don't recall what you said, and you're like, "Oh no."
Yeah, because I was confused. So we sell two different types of bottling machines, shall we say? One is basically a positive pressure one where you equalize the pressure between the keg and the what am I trying to
The
say?
bottle.
The bottle, right? Of course, the bottle, between the keg and the bottle. So when you're putting the beer in, you've actually pressurized the bottle and the keg so when you're pushing the beer in, there's not a huge level of difference between the two, and that keeps it from from foaming. With a Blickman beer gun, you don't actually do that. You purge the bottle, and then it goes all the way to the bottom, which is of the bottle, and you're slowly filling it. So that's the way you keep it from bubbling over too much, although it still does it a little bit. So yeah, that was a stupid comment last week. So it looks like I'm on par now to have a stupid comment every week. So
Oh, it feels so good though. Oh, it feels so good. Like to not be the one anymore. Oh, I mean, like me calling you an idiot is like when Zach called me fat in the office. It's just, it gotta hurt, right? It's gotta hurt.
it hurts. It hurts. Yeah.
Anyway, though, yes, I would say, Ivan, I think our consensus is
Did you just call me a fat idiot?
no. Whoa! I would never say that to my boss.
Okay.
Before we drink. So anyway, Ivan, I would say the consensus is maybe look into the lid one and see how it goes with the styles you're brewing before committing to the more permanent dip tube installation. And I say permanent, I think you can come back from it. It's just a real pain in the butt.
You have to cut the flare. You have to flare that tube. So when we do it, we put it and install it through the lid, and then bring it up through the gas side post, and then we actually have a tool that flares that. So once it's flared, it's in there. You have to cut the flare off to get the thing out.
Exactly. So yeah, it is for all intents and purposes, I call it a permanent change on your keg. And if you're doing water, I can 100% tell you right now, it is worth it. They're wonderful. If you have a keg that's purposed for water, it is absolutely the best thing ever, because I crank that thing up and it infuses, I like a bite to it. On the beer, I didn't notice a huge difference, but we have those kegs, so we're using them. I would be remiss to not use equipment that we already have. I don't know if I would have went out of my way to install a dip tube though, with the carb stone on it if I'm using it just for beer. I think there's better ways of ensuring proper carbonation, but I don't know if we're the guys to tell you about proper carbonation besides Todd. I mean, Todd can tell you all about proper carbonation, but
Yeah, I'm not.
James and I just sit in the corner and go, yeah, what he said. But we're actually going to cover carbonation to some extent, aren't we, Todd, in the talk that we give at HomebrewCon next week?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's my ending segue of saying sign up for HomebrewCon at homebrewcon.com and come to our talk. And if you're one of the 5 winners, check your inbox this evening. You're going to have a ticket instructions for redeeming them. And if you did win, you got to show up and say something nice about Todd in the comments during the talk. I mean, you could say something nice about me and James too, but really say, because Todd's going to be doing most of the talking. I have been able to make myself behind the camera for the majority of it, so I'll just be acting like I'm running the board, which today our experience has shown I'm not very good at that either. James is going to be a pretty face on the camera going over.
And by the way, Todd built that kegerator.
He did by himself.
He is so good working with wood, and it's a showpiece.
That keezer was more work than I realized it would be, and there were I learned a few things, particularly on the painting process that we should probably cover. You should do a little imitation of me talking so people know what they have to look forward to.
This is Todd Burns, and welcome to the program.
Now that was like Arnold, a really slow Arnold. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's pretty much the voice you always use when
I'm Todd Burns. Hi, I like turtles and beer, and I built this kegerator.
I'm sorry. Now people have tuned out already. We're done. Thank you guys so much for your time. I look forward. I'm coming up there tonight. I'm going to see you tomorrow and Friday, and then I'm going to be there all next week. And again, our presentation, we're going to do a podcast episode for next week as well. But we are presenting at HomebrewCon on that Thursday. If I had to ask you to do one or the other, I'd say tune in, because the talk is going to be really good. I'm actually very proud of it. Joking aside, Todd, all the work you put into it was great. I think the information that we're going to convey is very useful and probably going to be one of our better presentations that we've ever given, because it's going to be pretty thorough, and we have an hour of time, and we're going to do a Q&A as well. That's important to mention. We have allotted, I think, 10 or 15 minutes to people Q&A, and that's 15 minutes. Yeah. So we're going to just sit and dance and look pretty for 45 minutes, and then hope y'all have questions, or the talk is ending very soon. So thank y'all so much for tuning in, guys. Thank you all. See y'all soon.
See ya. Bye.
And that will do it for this episode of the Homebrew Happy Hour. If you have a question you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, go to homebrewhappyhour.com and click on the submit a question link at the top of the page. Or now you can call or text them in by using 325-305-6107. Thank you to our show sponsor, Imperial Yeast, for supporting us and the homebrewing community. When you join any top tier of our Patreon, you'll get free premium liquid Imperial Yeast shipped out to you with your monthly kit. Get more information at patreon.com/homebrew happy hour. On behalf of Todd Burns, James Carlson, and the Pearl Media Network, I'm Joshua Stubing. Thank you for listening.
This program is made possible by the checkbook of Mr. Todd Burns and by contributions to our newly launched Patreon by viewers like you. Visit patreon.com/homebrew happy hour and join our community. Thank you.